So this is the violin bow. We call this the stick, this wooden part right here. We call this the winding. This black part right here is called the grip, like a tennis racket. You grip the violin, you put your thumb in between the grip and the stick back here. This black contraption here that pulls the hair taut. The word is taut. T-A-U-T. The word taut means tight when something is pulled tight. Taut. Sounds like the word tight, so why not? So we pull the violin hair taut, and that contraption right here, this black piece, is called the frog. That's what does it. Why they came up with this name, I don't know. I wasn't at the meeting. Maybe there's a good reason for it. That's just what we call it, the frog, like ribbit. This little part here, mine is mother of pearl, is the eye of the frog. This is the stick, continued on. And behind there is the screw. That metal piece back there. Mine is octagonal. This little silver piece on the bow is called the ferrule at the edge of the frog. F-E-R-R-U-L-E. Make sure you're writing all this down. Ferrule. That silver piece right there. You have to bend your thumb when you hold the violin bow. Your thumb has to be bent, okay? You can't have what we call a tight thumb. It can't be straight. It needs to be bent. So what I do, I have the initial bow hold. You put your thumb between the grip and the stick, and then you drop your fingers down. And the bottom of it is right underneath the silver ferrule, that piece right there. That silver piece right here is called the ferrule. You can see on one of these bows, the ferrule is broken. So the silver piece is sliding. There it is. It goes here. This bow needs some serious TLC. This is the ferrule right there, that silver piece. It tucks right there in the frog, but it's broken on this bow, and you can see that. Feel free to touch the hair on that if you like. For an initial bow hold, what I like to do in order to have my students train their thumb to be bent, instead of putting the thumb where it should go, what I do is I call it the initial bow hold. I wedge the thumb all the way to the back of the frog. Now that's not where it goes, but to start out, I put it to the back of the frog because holding the bow is very tricky. It can take anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months to just get used to holding the bow, and that's normal. Don't worry about that. When you begin, I always say just take your thumb, wedge it right in there, tuck it all the way into the back of the frog, and then bend your thumb. And that's going to help you keep your thumb bent. If you find you're playing like this, if you find you have a tight thumb, you're going to have a tight sound. You don't want that. So you need to bend your thumb, wiggle your fingers, drop them. And your ring finger is going to come over the eye of the frog. Boom, drop them. Your thumb is still bent, so you're making a circle with your second finger, okay? If you're a pianist, 1, 2, 3, it's your third finger. If you're a violinist, it's your second finger. All right, they didn't get together when I wasn't at the meeting when the violin players and the piano players decided they were going to have different fingerings for their instruments. If I were there, it would have been the same. But I wasn't there 600 years ago. Maybe I was there. I don't know. 400 years ago, whenever it was. Maybe it's my fault. But anyway, you tuck your thumb into the frog, wiggle your fingers, drop them. Ring finger goes over the eye. That's the eye right there. That circle on the frog. Over the eye. You make a circle. Actually, what you're going to do here for the initial bow hold, take your middle finger, put it over your thumb, and touch the ferrule. Touch the silver ferrule. And that way you're going to make a circuit. Okay, you're going to make a closed pressure circuit so you can hold this bow. Now the bow's going to want to dip down. So you're going to take that pinky, stick it on top of the stick, right on top. Now that's going to feel a little weird, okay? Ring finger is over the eye. Middle finger is touching the ferrule against the ferrule, making a closed circuit with your thumb, which is bent, tucked all the way inside the frog. You're just going to drop your first finger down, just kind of wherever it goes. That doesn't matter. and you're going to sit your pinky on top. Now, this is going to feel very strange. It's going to feel very strange to the people who are just getting started with the bow, but that's going to act as a counterweight so the bow doesn't drop. Okay, your pinky is the counterweight right there. And that's how you hold your violin bow, okay, to start out. Eventually, you'll move your thumb over in between the grip and the stick when you have the control that you need. But for starting out, boom, go all the way back, tuck it into the frog. Okay, wiggle your fingers, drop down. If it drops down a little further, that's fine. And there you go. That's your bow hold. Okay, this black piece right here is the grip. Now this winding is a little bit different. We've got different windings. If you look on this bow here, the windings look different. Okay, I've kind of got the bumblebee black and yellow winding on the top bow, and then I just have a silver, almost like we could make a radio out of this thing, silver winding on the bow beneath it. They both have the black grip right next to the winding. Then they both have the frog. Now you can see this top bow has a beautiful mother of pearl eye. It's also got mother of pearl on the bottom of the frog. This bow is not as nice, doesn't have the mother of pearl eye. Now why would they do that? Why would a bow maker put the mother of the pearl in there? Well, the bow maker, he's somewhere maybe in France or Germany, and his family's been making bows for hundreds of years, and you're not going to talk to him. You're just going to go to the store and you're going to say, give me a bow. I want to buy a bow. And they're going to say, this bow is $200 and this one is $59. And you're going to say, well, what's the difference? Actually, the guy selling you the bow here in America probably wouldn't talk like that. But that's what they would talk like in France, because they probably have a heavy accent. So when they speak American. So you don't know. You're not going to talk to the guy who made the bow, but he has to communicate to you somehow that this is a good bow. All right. So he's finished making his bow and he's like, oh, this is very good bow. How can I tell? Maybe it's a Russian bow maker. I don't know. How can I tell the person who purchased this bow that it is a good bow? Right. So what he needs to do is communicate a message to you that this is a good bow. He made it. He knows this is a good bow. And so he's going to put a more expensive eye inside the bow. He's going to use mother of pearl. He's going to use a more expensive material, and he's going to put it on the bottom as well. And that way he's telling you, hey, you're going to have to pay more for this bow because I'm using the more expensive material, and I'm doing that to let you know, oh, by the way, this is a good bow. Okay, it's worth the extra price. And you know what? Pay it, because it's worth the extra price and you want a good bow. There's nothing wrong with paying the extra price for something good. That's what you want to do in life. All these people, oh, give me a discount. Forget about that. Get the good stuff. You get your bow and you use it. That's how it works. That's why this bow on top has the mother of pearl and this bow on bottom doesn't. It just has some plasticky thing. I don't know. Maybe that's not bad, actually. Who knows what that is? Looks like ivory or something, or marble. I don't know. Anyway, ultimately, the sound of the violin is going to be mostly affected by how you play it. But the sound of the violin is affected by very many things, and the bow can have a tremendous influence over the sound of the violin. You get a good bow, you're going to get a good sound, a good feeling. You're going to get good control. You'll see the eye here. Eyes are a little bit different. The lower one, I'm not even quite sure what that is. If you can get it, like, I'm not sure what that material, but it's a little darker, it's a little browner. You can see that. You can see the length of the bows is very different. Okay, so the bottom bow is for maybe a half violin or a quarter violin or something like that. And then the longer bow is for a bigger violin. Violins come in different shapes and sizes. You do not want to touch the horsehair with your hands. Your hands have natural dirt and oil on your hand. Even if you wash your hands, as you start to play and you sweat, the sweat will come out. You have natural oil that comes out of your hands. There's oil because we're living beings, and all living beings, for the most part, have oil. The oil and the dirt and the sweat that's on your hands, if you touch the horsehair, okay, this is horsehair, that right there, the bow is actual horsehair. That's what makes contact with the metallic string. If your hand touches the horsehair, you're going to transfer the dirt and the oil and the sweat from your hand onto the horsehair. And then when you draw the bow across the string, it's going to affect the sound. You're not going to have a very good sound. There's not going to be as much friction. It's not going to sound as good. And since the string is vibrating so much as you draw the bow across, a lot of the dirt will jump off and jump onto your violin. And when your violin maker makes the violin, he's scraping that top piece of wood. It's made of spruce. He's scraping before he puts the whole box together. The violin, when I say box, I mean the violin. We call it a box. It's a round box. It's beautiful, but it's a box. It's not a rectangle box, but it's a box. When he puts the box together and he puts that spruce top on top and he has the maple ribs and the maple back, he wants that spruce top to be very thin so that it can vibrate like a microphone diaphragm. That way it can vibrate and it has a really sweet tone, a really beautiful tone. As the dirt cakes up on top of your violin, that spruce top is going to get thicker and thicker. It's not going to vibrate as well, and that's going to affect the sound of your violin. It's not going to be as sweet a sound. So you want that thin top, so you don't want dirt jumping off as you play the violin, and you don't want to get this dirty. Now I'll show you what a dirty bow looks like. The bow here is very, very dirty. Don't know if you can see it so well, but it's extremely dirty. The bow on bottom, let me tighten it, if it's even tightenable, is extremely dirty. It's very dirty, whereas the bow on top is white. It's clean. The bow on bottom also doesn't have a lot of bow left. You can see that the hairs have been pulled off. This is a very old bow, very dirty bow. It's actually quite a nice bow. It's an octagonal bow. You may be able to see the shape there. I don't know if we can get that focus or not. It's not a round bow on top, it's octagonal. It's a pretty good bow. It's got a very nice screw at the back too. So you can see the screws are very different. Okay, the bottom screw has a black piece in the middle. The top screw is more metallic. So you can see this bow is very, very dirty. We don't want that, but it's dirty, so you can touch that all you want. You can touch this. Now this bow actually has a mother of pearl eye, so it was a very good bow, and if I got it restrung and repaired, it'd be a very good bow. This is called the tip, T-I-P, the tip of the bow. Then the horsehair will meet the frog where the silver ferrule is. If I screw the bow, you will see that the bow starts to become tight, and the bow, which is naturally bowed, starts to straighten. Now let me show you this on a different bow. You always, as a matter of maintenance, you always want to unscrew and loosen your string before you put the bow away back in the case. Because if you leave the bow screwed in, the bow is going to warp. It's going to warp in the opposite direction. It's going to get straight. And if the bow gets straight because it's sitting in your case screwed in and it's straight and it hardens that way, if it sits there long enough, then you're not going to be able to tighten it. You tighten the bow so that the horsehair will get taut. It will get tightened. But if it's already tightened, then there's no more tightness to go, and it's not going to work. So you always want to unscrew, as a matter of maintenance, you always want to unscrew your bow and loosen the strings before you put it in. Some people ask, well, how much do I unscrew? I don't know. You just kind of unscrew it so it's not tight, basically. Unscrew it so it's not tight, but you're able to still put it in your case and twist that lock without that lock getting in the way of the horsehair and ripping them off. Now, here's a bow that's completely warped. If I unscrew this bow is actually unscrewed, and you can see this bow is almost straight. It doesn't bend like that. I'm bending it with my fingers now. The bow is straight. It's very warped. The bow is straight, and you can see the strings are loose. Now I'm going to tighten it, and as I tighten it, you see the bow can't really get any more straight. Now, oddly enough, this is tight. I mean, you could play on that. The question arises, well, how tight do you want the bow to get when you play? That's a little bit of a personal preference. You don't have to tighten it. I've seen violin players, they tighten it all the way. They like that hard sound. Other violin players, they tighten it a little bit. They get a little softer sound. Sort of a personal preference. As you get more experience, you may tighten it a little bit more or less. I don't know. Now, this one actually is starting to bow in the opposite direction. I've tightened the screw, and now the bow is actually bowing outward. And the bow should never be doing that. And you can see this one has the very dirty and very thin horsehair. This is the problem bow. It's got a beautiful mother of pearl. So this would be a nice bow, but there's a lot of problems with this bow. I would have to get this bow repaired and restrung. So I will show you what happens when you unscrew the screw all the way. And let's just take it out. just for kicks. Okay, so we're going to take that screw out all the way, and there is the screw, as you can see. You can't really see inside too well, but you know, there's not sort of much to see. But what happens now is this piece, the frog, actually gets detached from the stick. So you can see the screw screws into that bottom metal piece right there. You can see it. My shirt is behind it. Okay, and that's what, when you screw in, this frog pulls outward and tightens. And so that's how that mechanism works. And you can see there's a slot in the stick right there where this frog will go. And so we'll screw that back in. We'll take that and we'll put that back in. And we'll screw it. Now, don't you take your screw out. If you need to take your screw out, give it to a luthier. And the word luthier means somebody who works on violins. Now, they also use that word to mean somebody who works on guitars. The original word came from lute, somebody who works on lutes, because the lute was the instrument that was the predecessor to the violin. And the lute was pretty much just like, you know, kind of like almost like a cigar box. And it was sort of this, you know, violin guitar type of instrument. The violin repair guys and the guitar repair guys both call themselves luthiers because it comes from the lute. You can see here that when I have all of the bows lined up, they are different lengths. So you can see that all of these screws are lined up for all of these bows. And so if we go to the end, you can see that the tips are not lined up. So you can see that the bows have different lengths. People have different arm lengths. People have different violin lengths. And so you can see that the bows are indeed different lengths. Inside the violin case, so you twist the screw in the case and you pull the violin bow out of the case. Good. And then go ahead and put it back in the case. Carefully there. And you put the tip through that part. And then you wind the screw. Boom. And you lock it in. You have to make sure when you put the violin bow back in the case that you don't end up getting the hairs caught in the little wind screw there. You will at some point. If you do, don't worry about it. If you get a hair that gets broken, that's okay. That happens. If you have a horsehair that gets dislodged from the stick, it gets broken. We've got a stick here with all sorts of hairs that are kind of all over the place. You can see them. There's these hairs that are just coming off the tip here. When that happens, gets stuck for some reason, what you do is you just kind of wind it around your finger, kind of it's in a knot here, so unknot it a little bit, wind it, and then you pull it, and you put your thumb all the way to the end, and then you just rip it off right there. And don't keep that as a keepsake. Throw it in the trash. And so you've got this stick with all these. Now you can take a look at the grip here. This has a long grip. That's a really long grip. There's no winding on this. It's just all grip. There's no winding right there. That's just all grip. It's hard to see a little bit. That's the grip. Normally there would be a winding here and then the grip. So I don't know. This one doesn't have it. This one, the ferrule has come off too. So, but I can actually put this ferrule back on, this silver piece right here. We'll slide that back on. If that comes off, it's time to go to the luthier and have this repaired. And you can see the string is hanging off there, the other one. Another violin maintenance thing I want to discuss with you. So I once lived in the mountains of Virginia, the boonies, and I saw all these violins, these 1700s, from the 1700s, and they were passed down from a long time. Guys had fiddled with them in all sorts of ways. They lower the fingerboard, they saw the bridge down, they move the bridge around. They use different types of pegs. They saw the pegs off. These guys in the woods, they do all sorts of things to fiddle with the violin. And when you fiddle with the violin, we call it a fiddle. Okay, because there's standard things that the violin, standard proportions that the violin is supposed to have. And if you fiddle with it, it becomes a fiddle. And then what they do is they take their bow and they take their fiddle and they fiddle on it, which means they play a lot of things using DNA. Right, so they'll fiddle around. And the word is fiddle, F-I-D-D-L-E. A lot of people have this question, what's the difference between a violin and a fiddle? And the standard answer is nothing. A violin is a fiddle. And the answer is not correct. There are differences between a violin and a fiddle. So what happens is when you fiddle with it, when you lower the fingerboard, you raise the fingerboard, you saw down the bridge, you make little adjustments with it because you're a fiddler, then you become a fiddler and you're going to fiddle on the violin. It's not like you're playing these classical pieces. You're just sort of fiddling around. And then you're a fiddler, and you've got your fiddle, and you're fiddling on it, and it's a fiddle. And that's what the word fiddle means. A violin and a fiddle are not the same thing. A fiddle is a violin that has been fiddled with. Somebody has messed with it and done something to it. Or it's a violin where you can fiddle on it. You haven't really taken professional classical lessons, but you sit on your porch in your rocking chair all day long and go, and you're a fiddler. And that's what the difference is. A maintenance note here, this is called a string cloth. It's a special cloth that you want to buy. Don't just take any cloth to wipe down your violin. Please don't do that. Don't take a napkin. Don't take a paper towel. They have chemicals. You don't want to get into all that. You want to buy specifically a string cloth from your local music store or wherever you're going to get it. It's a string cloth. It opens up. You can see mine is very dirty. It's got a lot of dirty. Used it a lot. If I open it up, it's much cleaner on the inside. It's dirtier on the outside because the outside is the part that I use the most. But then I'll switch to the inside after a while. I probably need to get myself a new cloth or just turn this inside out. In fact, let me go ahead and do that. Turn it inside out. As you bow your violin, as you play your violin, the dirt is jumping off and the rosin is jumping off of your bow onto the spruce top. And it's caking up. And I've seen some violins. They cake up and cake up. Don't do this. Don't let your violin get that way. After you're finished, every single time, how often should I wipe my violin down? Every time. Every time you use it, wipe it down. It doesn't take that long. It doesn't take that much. Take your violin. Now you have to be very, very careful when you wipe your violin down. Do not, I repeat, do not bump into the bridge. Because if that bridge moves, then you have to go and get the bridge reset by luthier, and that's going to cost you hundreds of dollars. So don't do that because it has to be in a very specific place. If the bridge is not in a very specific place, if it doesn't line up with the grooves in the F-holes, or it's not measured correctly and it's not centered, then you're going to train your fingers to touch the fingerboard in the incorrect place to get the pitch that you want to get. So you're going to have to spend a lot of money to get that bridge reset. And that's very important. You have to do that. Okay? You can't train your fingers to play incorrectly. You don't want to do that. If you bump that bridge, your violin becomes a fiddle. So don't do that unless you want to be a fiddler. And then you have to move into the mountains and play a different kind of music. So take your violin cloth, don't bump your bridge, but get in there and wipe just gently. You don't have to, it's a violin. It's a sensitive wooden box. Don't break it. Just gently wipe off the rosin, okay, and in between the bridge and the fine tuners there. Now mine's pretty clean because I wipe it down every single time. I wipe it there. Maybe you could wipe it. Don't drop it. All right, make sure you hold it nicely. Just wipe the rosin off. You don't have to wipe the rosin off the strings. Some people, maybe you want to. You don't have to do that because you're just going to get the rosin back on the strings anyways. And remember, never touch your violin in between the fingerboard and the bridge. You can pluck it over the fingerboard You can get the dirt, you're going to get the dirt and the oil on the string over here, but don't get the dirt and the oil on the string in between the fingerboard and the bridge. The bridge is this unvarnished piece of wood. It's freestanding. It's not attached to the violin. The only thing that holds it down is the tension on the strings. So if you loosen all the strings, the bridge falls over. Don't touch the strings in between the end of the fingerboard and the bridge. Some people pluck here. Don't do that. So, pizzicato. The reason is because the dirt from your hands and the oil and the sweat from your hands, your fingers will get onto the strings in between the fingerboard and the bridge. And that's fine, but it's not fine when you then bow the violin. The dirt will transfer from the string to the horsehair on the violin, and we don't want that, as we learned earlier. So you're not going to bow the violin above the fingerboard, so you can touch the strings above the fingerboard. That's fine. Don't touch them where you bow. Now, if you need to get underneath, I used to do something where I'll take the violin, but you can drop the violin if you do this, so it's not good. I take the violin and then take the cloth and put it under the strings, but that's kind of tricky. I wouldn't recommend that. What I do now is I have this tool that I bought. This is actually for guitars, but I use this on my violin, and it's kind of like you can apply your makeup with this too. Okay, you can just wipe that right there, and on one end it has this brush, and on the other hand it has, I don't know, this lint collector looking type of thing. And you just go up here. Always very sensitive. Don't be violent with your violin, because then it becomes a fiddle very quickly, and we don't want that. You can fiddle on a violin, but you can't, well, it doesn't go both ways. And that's how you care for your violin. You want to keep your violin free from rosin. You want to keep your violin rosin free. Any questions? Thank you.